Hi everybody, it's me, Shadia Wade. Excuse me. Gosh. Um, I'm gonna talk about anxiety and how other people's moods can affect your mood and cause you to be anxious. And, you know, a person who suffers with bipolar disorder or anxiety or depression or whatever. A lot of times they feed off of other people's moods and it increases uh, the potential for stressors on those conditions. Um, right now, I would say that my husband's anxiety really plays into my mood because he's been really anxious and really stressed and stuff with school. So I've been doing a lot of really meditating uh, on this topic because I want to know why it is that um, we feed off of each other like that. I think that human beings are just we're intuitive creatures. Like we are so in tune with other people that we connect with them, we have empathy with them, and we're able to feel what they're feeling. And if you already feel anxious, it ends up making you feel even more anxious because you feel helpless or um, you want to be able to help change the mood, but you can't. Um, at least that's my experience with how I've been feeling as of late. I love my husband to death, and I really wish that I could change his situation to make him less stressed. Um, but the only thing I can do is continue to be sort of the caregiver of our son um, and make sure that he's getting all the time he needs from his parents and that he's taken care of, and to make sure that I take care of myself and take care of my husband when he neglects himself, and just kind of be that pillar of strength and guidance and support for him. And I wish that, like with school, I could just like smack his teachers around or something to make it easier for him to know like why it is that he's having so many struggles, and be able to fix that and to communicate that with his instructors. But obviously, that's not my place. The only thing I can do is tell him, hey, you have to talk to your teachers or you have to talk to whoever you need to talk to um, with regards to your classes, and let them know what the issues are so that maybe they can fix it for the next set of people. Or maybe the instructor can be more sympathetic to the problems of the class, um, and let them know that there's a breach in the way that they communicate or what their lessons are. And I give him that sort of advice, and uh, hopefully, he takes it in stride and doesn't see it as me lecturing him, because I don't want to lecture him, but like I've been in situations, especially when I was in the military, of where something wrong was going on. There was a lack of real concern for my well-being, and I had expressed to the command that I was in serious pain because I had injured my shoulder, my right shoulder, and I'm right hand dominant. And I had explained to them that I was on limited light duty, which means that you can't perform certain tasks, like you can't do physical training or some job tasks and things like that. You're actually not even allowed to deploy. And, they were going to send me to this training out in Yuma, Arizona. And I said, look, this is what's wrong with me. I'm on limited light duty and I'm still experiencing issues. I don't think that it's possible for me to go. And they said, look, just go get a chit, it's fine, go. And when I got to Arizona, they asked me if there was anything that would prohibit me from doing my job, and I explained to them that I was on light limited duty because of a shoulder injury, and they sent me back to my command, and my command was about to do what's called an NJP, a non-judicial punishment, which would possibly reduce my rank, take away my pay, and restrict me to the barracks for 30 days. Another plausible recourse was to go to court-martial, but I was ordered to go and get a chit or a piece of paper saying that I was on light limited duty, and I was ordered to go to this training in Arizona and work in Arizona on the combat flight training facility there. And so it really hurt me that I was set up for failure by my superiors. And I had a lot of my peers stand up and say, look, no, you sent her out there knowing full well that she was going to get in trouble, that she had an issue, and that she wasn't supposed to go. And she even expressed her concerns about it, and you did it anyway. So, no, you can't punish her for something you did intentionally. So I was really surprised at my peers and the people who stood up for me, because I always kind of thought they didn't like me. And I was really surprised that my superiors were going to punish me for something that they told me to do. And so I ended up losing a lot of trust and a lot of faith in my supervisors. And I think that kind of led into why I had a breakdown, because it was 3 years before they finally found out what was wrong with my shoulder. I had injured it in 2006, and finally had surgery on it in 2008, 2009, 2009. 2009, I had surgery on it. I had actually fractured my clavicle and had torn my labrum, which is the kind of ligament that holds your ball and socket joint in your shoulder together. And I had a tear from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock, or was it 6 to 9? Or anyway, it was like a quarter of the clock face that was torn, and I had to have anchors put in, and I have limited range of motion in my right arm, and there's definitely substantial weakness in that arm and stability in that arm. I still have it kind of pop out of socket every once in a while, and stuff like that. Like before the surgery, my shoulder would pop out of socket constantly, even when pushing in a chair. Like something so simple. Like, I remember, like, constantly having to pop it back into place. Like, I could do it at will. Like, I would just move my shoulder down and up, and it would just pop in and out of socket. I can still do that kind of now, but the anchors really hold it in place as much as possible. But I still have pain in my shoulder, I still have weakness, and I still have limited range of motion in that shoulder. But when I talk about my breakdown, it was, realizing that nobody really cared about the truth. I cared about the truth, and I was seeking out the truth, and I was fighting for the truth, but my command was not. And Alonzo. And it was like, does anybody care outside of me about me? And I lost it, because the people who were supposed to care about me and take care of me were supposed to be my supervisors and my peers and stuff, and nobody seemed to care. And when you feel like everyone is basically calling you a liar and saying it's all in your head, and there's nothing wrong with you, and stuff for years, that takes a toll on you, because you yourself know what's going on with you. You know that something's not right. Like, my body is not supposed to feel this much pain if nothing's wrong. Like, I should be able to move my arm up and down and lift things and do all this stuff without my shoulder popping out of socket, and things like that. So, it was in 2009 that I had a nervous breakdown and started hallucinating and was very anxious and very manic, and decided to check myself into a hospital because I had a plan to harm myself and harm my family. And, I never had this explained to my command. My command was just aware that I had checked myself into the hospital, into the mental ward, and that I was going to be staying there for a while. They were never informed about directly related information like the fact of suicide or homicide. They were never made aware of the fact that I was hallucinating. They were never made aware of the fact that I was anxious and all this stuff. All they knew was that I was in the hospital and that I was going to be there for a while. While I was in the hospital, they talked to me about, like, what was going on and how I felt and what I wanted to do. And I said, look, I don't trust anybody. I don't trust my command. I feel like they're all against me, because no one's being supportive of the fact that I've been injured and I'm still recovering. I don't feel supported. I feel like everyone's out to get me, which is kind of like a sign of schizophrenia, which is why they diagnosed me with borderline traits, or borderline schizophrenia, or borderline personality disorder, or whatever you want to call it. Because that feeling like something's out to get you or people are out to get you is a character flaw. You shouldn't be feeling that way. You should feel supported by your peers and your supervisors. And it has always made it really hard for me to trust anybody. When I started having hallucinations and stuff, and really, before I checked myself in the hospital, and even while I was in the hospital, I didn't trust Dustin, my husband now, to take care of our kid, or take care of the bills, or take care of the house. I didn't trust him with any of that. I was still really concerned and really afraid that things weren't getting done, and that, the situation would progressively become an issue. Somehow he did manage to get all the bills paid on time, raise our child, get him to child care while he worked, and pick him up from child care when he got off work, and all this stuff. But in my mind, it wasn't enough. I couldn't trust him. And I had to seriously, fight the urge to be angry with him, and fight the urge to lash out at him, and stuff, because of my distrust in people. I didn't trust anybody. I remember my mom coming to visit me in the hospital, and the first thing she said is, "Stop playing around." She didn't believe that her daughter had an issue. And, people don't know what causes mental illness, really. They say hereditary, they say environmental, they say all these things, but there's no real distinct reason for why a person gets anxious. There's no distinct reason for why a person is diagnosed bipolar. There's no real reason why someone's diagnosed with manic depression or major depressive disorder or anything like that. There's no real definite answer as to why a person is that way. I kind of think that it is hereditary in my family for me, because I see a lot of characteristics of my dad in me. He would fly off the handle at the slightest thing, and become very paranoid and very standoffish and stuff. Granted, there were times where he was a very happy-go-lucky person, easygoing, but there were also times where he was very coarse and very hard to deal with. It's really hard for me to talk about my dad, because we kind of had a history of abuse, me and my brother and sister, from my dad. And I love him and I respect him, but there were things that he did that I did not love or respect him for doing. I remember when I was about 13 years old, we had gone out to the Middle East in August and spent the entire month with our dad in the Middle East, in Egypt and Gaza, and we went to Jerusalem. And I remember in Egypt, in Cairo, two of my cousins had read my journal, and in my journal I had talked about some man in the neighborhood at which I lived in who had molested me. And they threatened to tell my dad about it. And I didn't want my dad to know about this incident, because I knew my dad might see it as my fault, or thought my dad might see it as my fault, or that he would go out and seek justice by harming this individual, and I just wanted it to be something that I could talk about in my journal and cope with, and just have a dialogue with myself over and really come to terms with, and not have anybody know. Now everybody knows because I just divulged it on YouTube, but yeah, I was molested about the age of 11, and had written about it in my journal, and my cousins had threatened to tell my dad. So we were at one of my uncle's apartments or houses or condos or whatever. It was a very big apartment, so I hate to call it an apartment. I think it was more of a condo. And I left the condo and went downstairs, and I was pursued by one of my male cousins. And so I kept walking, and I was going toward one of my aunt's house, towards my aunt's house, who lived not far, maybe about 4 or 5 blocks away. And I was pursued the whole time, and I ended up going into an underground garage, and I was trapped. And the cousin called my dad and let him know where I was, and my dad came, and he pulled me down by my hair and threw me on the ground, and was kicking and punching and beating me. And then he dragged me by my hair to the car and threw me into the car, took off his belt, and proceeded to lash me with it. And I remember my sister being in the car, and she covered me so that I would stop being beaten. And I was so terrified of my dad at that time. And we had gotten back to my uncle's house, and I was so close to my aunt's house, but when I had gotten cornered, and we got back to my uncle's house where I had left, and my dad told me to get out of the car, and my sister got out, and I got out on the other side, and I ran across the street. And in Cairo, there really aren't a whole lot of traffic lights, and people do not observe a speed limit there. So I was running across the street in wild traffic, and I ran into an apartment complex and hid, and watched my dad run past. And I was going up to apartments and knocking on the door and asking to use the phone so I could call the U.S. Embassy, because I was done. I wanted to go home. I was fearful for my life, and every one of them people who answered the door told me to go back to my dad. And I remember stepping outside of the apartment complex. One of my cousins, who was a female, came up in a car and told me to get in, and we drove to my aunt's house, and it was my Aunt Munira, and she was very consoling, and you know, I had soiled myself out of fear, because you know, when you're afraid. That just kind of happens sometimes. And I felt pain in my head and all over my body. And I had substantial bruising starting to form and everything. And my aunt asked me if I wanted to talk to my dad, and I said, not right now. But she had told me he was here. And I remember when I finally did say I would see him, but I wasn't going to leave the room, and that I wanted my aunt there. My dad was crying, and like, now as a parent, I understand why he got so angry at me being a young woman walking the streets of Cairo by myself. But at the time, it didn't seem logical to be beaten, and I still don't see it as a logical thing. Like, I could understand him yelling at me and being angry, but to abuse a person, to physically harm a person because they did something that you didn't approve of, I don't agree with. And it was a long time before I could really trust my dad again and really talk to him and stuff. I remember when we came back, I told my mom about the incident, and I told her I don't want to see him. I don't want anything to do with him. I'm really angry, and I'm really frightened to be around him. So please don't make me go and visit him, because I'm just scared that he'll do it again. And you know, I think about, well, what if I took my son to Cairo and he did that? And how would that make me feel? And I would be very scared for my child. I would be terrified. I would be like, what if somebody picked them up and took them and made them into something that they weren't? Like, there are evils of the world, and there are evil people all over the place, no matter what religious belief they have. There are evil people. But you know, even the person who is supposed to protect you and guide you in life, like your parents, not believing in you, not trusting you, and not caring for you, really has an impact on your life. And you know, it wasn't until I was older that I ever reconciled with my dad. And you know, said, you know, what you did was wrong, and I don't agree with, but I still love you. And I don't know what that says about me as a person. I must be really strong to overcome something like that and still feel love for that person. And still have some respect for that person as my parent. I miss my dad. He died of cancer in 2002, and he died of lymphoma, and I watched him physically change from the person who was my father, who was strong and resilient, to this decrepit, gangly, sort of gaunt person. And I remember telling my dad every time I saw him was that you can't give up, you have to eat, you have to keep fighting. And he did all the way up until the end. And even at the end of his life, he didn't want to go. Like, he didn't feel it was right to leave. Like, my stepmom and my uncles agreed to pull the plug on my dad, and I wasn't present. And I think that was a big thing for him, because I think he wanted me there, because I remember having phone conversation with him on Father's Day the year before he died, like the year of his death, and they had set him up with a ventilator and stuff, and he was on dialysis, and they had to strap him down because he tried to pull the tubes out to talk to me on the phone, and I had to talk him down and let him know that he needed the ventilator, and that the nurses were doing this for his own good, and that he had to, comply. There are a lot of things that attributed to his death and to his illness, and it was shortly after his death that they actually started finding cures for lymphoma. So I wish that things were different, but alhamdulillah, he was taken, and inshallah he's in heaven, and I will see him again, and we will have many things to talk about. Like, we'll talk about his grandson and his new son, my husband, and we'll have deep conversations about how I came to Islam and how he influenced that, even though he wasn't here. How even not being present, he is still present. This turned out to be a very emotional video. But I'm a real person. I've suffered a lot of different types of things. I've suffered a lot of loss and a lot of abuse. And this is only a sample of my life. This isn't the entirety. Maybe one day I'll sit down and have a full dialogue about my life from childhood to now. But I don't feel really ready for that. Because it's really hard to talk about. I think that it's important to talk about one's life, whether it's bad or good, because by talking about it, you ease the pain of it, pain that you have experienced in your life. From every conversation that I have about my dad, when I do have conversations about my dad, I see things in a newer perspective. Like, as a child, I thought as a child, and as a parent, I think as a parent. So, I'm able to play the devil's advocate for my dad and his behavior when I was younger. I don't completely condone it, but I understand it more now than I did then. And I have a greater respect and admiration of how much my father loved me and wanted to protect me. And I hope he knows how much I love him. And that I may do it for him. That I want the blessings in my life to be blessings upon him too. Because he wasn't always a good man. He wasn't always the best Muslim. He wasn't always the best dad. But in the end, he turned his life around and worked really hard to be better. To be a better Muslim, to be a better man, to be a better parent. And I really pray that God is merciful with my dad. And that he forgives my dad as I forgive him. Because he deserves forgiveness. Everyone deserves forgiveness if they ask to be forgiven, if they're really repentful. If they really are turning from what they did and who they used to be and turning away from that life to better themselves, I think they deserve forgiveness. I have a person in my life who I called a friend, and she was just recently arrested on charges of theft and fraud. This person was a person that tried to commit suicide in front of me, and I saved her life by calling 911 and helping to stop the bleeding from her wounds. And I'm thinking about going and visiting her and letting her know that I forgive her for the things that she said and did to me, because she blamed me at one point for her attempt at suicide. Even though I was the one who saved her, she blamed me for it. And I want her to know that I forgive her. So I'm debating going and seeing her in prison or in jail. If they'll let me see her. Because, you know, the rules for visiting inmates are very strict. There's like a list. So I don't know if they'll let me do that or not. But inshallah, I'll be able to do it. Only God will know if it's the right thing to do. And He will make time for it, and He will make a way for that to happen. But I don't really have a good wrap up for this. I kinda just started talking and started crying, and now here I am. So, I am a human being. I have feelings, and I want people to know that you can come back from a lot of bad in your life. That the situations that happen in your life will come, and it's what you do to overcome them that defines you as a person, not the events themselves. Being molested as a child does not make me less human or a lesser being. It does not make it my fault. But it does make me aware of the fact that there are people out there that will hurt you, and they are intentionally looking for you. And I refuse to be a victim. I choose to be a champion instead. I choose to overcome and be better than that. It happened, but I am not a weaker person because of it. My dad was abusive, both physically, mentally, and emotionally, but that does not define me. What defines me is the fact that even through all of that, I have chosen a different path. And I know that those things are wrong, the things he did. And I have forgiven him for it, but I refuse to be that to my kid. I made a promise to my son the day he was born that no matter what, I would protect him, even if that means protecting him from myself. And so far, I've been true to my word. And, you know, you just gotta keep pushing. You gotta keep standing up tall and holding your head up and thinking to yourself, I am better than what has happened to me. What has happened to me may be bad, but I am not a bad person. I'm a good person. I am worthy of respect. And I am worthy of compassion. And just continue to press on and persevere. Be a champion, not a victim. That's what I've chosen to be. I have chosen to be an advocate for those who suffer with whatever, because you never know what impact you'll have on the next person to come along in your life, and I want to be a positive one. So I'll be done being serious and end it here, because it's been a really long conversation. Lots of things to think about, and stuff I've reflected on in my life and my history, my past. But I'm still happy. I'm still optimistic, and I look forward to it every day, because there's always going to be something good about it. So take care. Please like, share, favorite, comment, whatever it is you choose to do, and stay watching.